Tonight, a monumental conviction. A Scottish crime boss is sentenced to 20 years in prison for a multi-million-pound international cocaine smuggling plot.
This conviction is monumental, obviously because Jamie Stevenson and his gang were involved in major drug trafficking on an industrial and global scale.
Also making the headlines, the crisis in Scotland's jails. A warning our prison population could soar to a record high by January, despite the early release programme.
Mr. Alistair McCoist for services to association football and to broadcasting.
The Rangers and Scotland legend Super Ali becomes Ali McCoist OBE. I'm Emma Cameron in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. A crime boss who orchestrated a plot to smuggle cocaine worth £100 million from South America in boxes of bananas has been jailed for 20 years. Jamie Stevenson, who's known as the Iceman, admitted directing the importation of the drug and running a street Valium pill factory which could churn out 250,000 tablets an hour.
5 other members of his gang, including the fruit merchant who provided a front for the cocaine trafficking, were jailed for a total of 29 years for their role in this complex operation. Our chief reporter Sharon Frew was in court.
Alicante, Valentine's Day 2020. This photograph turned suspicions about activity at a Glasgow wholesaler's into a global investigation. The person sitting opposite the fruit merchant who was under surveillance was one of the UK's most wanted men, Jamie Stevenson. Over the following months, the seizure of nearly a tonne of cocaine hidden in banana boxes, the cracking of an encrypted communication network and the raid on a pill factory led to the downfall of the 59-year-old known as Iceman.
This conviction is monumental, obviously because Jamie Stevenson and his gang were involved in major drug trafficking on an industrial and global scale.
Stevenson has been jailed for 20 years for directing what was described as a complex operation, using his money and influence to effectively take over the Glasgow business owned by David Bilsland and run it as a front for his smuggling enterprise.
18 banana consignments were duly received in Dover. The last of these contained almost a tonne of cocaine, with a purity of not less than 73% by weight, and with the potential to realise in the region of £76 million.
David Bilsland has been jailed for 6 years for his role, which saw him turn his family business from a fruit to drug importer. Lloyd Cross has also been locked up for 6 years. He played a significant role in relaying Stevenson's instructions to Bilsland.
This would have required a degree of sophistication of international networks and contacts, but also the amounts that they were moving was much more than probably just the Scottish domestic market. So they were servicing, no doubt, other parts of the UK and perhaps even Europe.
The crime boss's plan also included flooding communities with a tisalam known as street Valium. When his pill factory in Kent was raided, 13.5 million tablets were discovered. 3 men, including Stevenson's stepson, Jared Carbon, have been jailed for their part in this operation. Stevenson was arrested on the same day as the raid on the pill factory. He was at a picnic table at Glasgow's Sherbrooke Castle. When plain-clothed officers arrived, Stevenson fled, fearing a gangland hit. As he tried to make his escape, he left his EncroChat device behind. Investigators were already making their way through thousands of lines of raw data from the encrypted network, which had been smashed by European authorities. This gang was brazen in its use of the platform, and it exposed the full scale of this operation.
So EncroChat absolutely filled the gap. James Stevenson was a serious organised criminal acting at the absolute top level of criminality in Scotland. So that crime group led by Jamie Stevenson has now been effectively dismantled. However, we can't be complacent. Obviously, where there's demand for illicit drugs, somebody will fill that demand.
Experts say it's a constant cat and mouse situation, with the substantial amounts of cash already recovered likely to be the tip of a bigger iceberg.
I believe the EncroChat revelations caused a high degree of paranoia. I think people are sitting around the world still who were a part of EncroChat activity, who have yet to be arrested and brought to justice. And I don't suspect that this effort has finished yet. They weren't untouchable, and they are accessible despite this platform offering what seemed to be the ultimate freedom to commit crime.
Jamie Stevenson's defence counsel told the High Court that his clients had made a series of bad decisions for which the motivation was obvious. Thomas Ross, KC, said he knew exactly what he was doing and doesn't seek to cast blame in anyone else's direction. Stevenson plans to appeal his sentence. Sharon Frew, STV News at the High Court in Glasgow.
Scotland's prison population could soar to a record high in January. That's according to Scottish Government projections. There are 8,300 inmates in the country's jails today, but that could reach 9,250 next year.
Almost 500 prisoners were released early this summer to free up space, and 57 of them are already back inside after reoffending. Our political editor Colin Mackay has been speaking to the Justice Secretary. And Colin, what did she have to say?
Well, Angela Constance is the Justice Secretary who had to agree to the release of 477 inmates early to ease overcrowding and free up space for newly convicted criminals. 57 of them, as you say, have already returned to prison, mostly for violence and crimes of dishonesty. There are 8,300 inmates in Scotland's prisons today. The absolute maximum capacity is about 8,500. So if they reach the top end of the government projection, over 9,000, there wouldn't be enough cell space or prison staff.
We do need to work to reduce the prison population so it is more sustainable going forward, and actually that is also what's in the interest of community safety, because if our prisons are unsafe, our communities are unsafe.
Do you think they are unsafe at the moment?
No, I think our prison service...
At 8,300, do you think they're safe?
I communicate very regularly and directly with the Scottish Prison Service, as you would expect me to do. And I know that the measures we took around emergency release gave some short-time respite, but also enabled other changes to be made in terms of both the estate and in terms of the population management. They are coping, they tell me they're coping.
Now, those changes that she's talking about are opening a new hall at Grampian, expanding Low Moss, and only adults in Pullman, which creates a bit more space. But increasing early release isn't straightforward. It would need fresh legislation in the Scottish Parliament. And in June and July, prison governors vetoed 171 inmates who were applying for early release because they still posed a risk. The head of the Scottish Prison Service has said that overcrowding makes tension, volatility, violence and self-harm increase. That's when prisons can become powder kegs.
Colin, at the Scottish Parliament, thank you.
The Conservative conference has come to an end with speeches from the 4 candidates vying to replace Rishi Sunak as party leader.
From Birmingham, our Westminster correspondent Paris Gutzianis reports on the conference and where the candidates stand in the race.
This has been a Conservative Party conference unlike anything we've seen for years. Rather than one unified message from a leader, the people filing out of the conference hall now have just heard from 4 different leadership candidates, all with very different prescriptions for what went wrong with the Conservative Party and how they can regain power.
My opponents claim that they've got more management experience around the cabinet table. Sure, that's true. But I'm not here to manage. I'm here to lead. We're not going to change this party and this country with the same management, the same mantra, the same slogan.
Let's be enthusiastic, relatable, positive, optimistic. Let's be more normal. Let's sell the benefits of conservatism with a smile.
I will fight for the effective freeze in net migration our country needs. Will we be open to the best and the brightest? Yes, absolutely. Will we be open to the world and its wife and all their extended family? No.
The truth is, we lost faith and stopped acting like Conservatives. We stopped being leaders and became managers. We spoke right and governed left. And when we went after Labour votes, we lost our own.
Clear dividing lines there between the right and the centre ground. Robert Jenrick spoke like the frontrunner he is, focusing his attacks on Labour. Kemi Badenoch called for reform of the whole government system, including devolution. And they've both caused controversy this week, with Robert Jenrick suggesting special forces are killing terror suspects to get around human rights law. And Kemi Badenoch questioned maternity pay and whether the NHS should always be free to use. In the centre ground, James Cleverly or Tom Tugendhat are most likely to be eliminated next, and it felt like James Cleverly got the better reception in the hall. The pitch here in Birmingham was to party members, but it's MPs who will vote to narrow down the field to 2 next week. So campaigning now moves back to Westminster and its tea rooms and corridors.
Well, it's good to see Yanis in Birmingham. Tributes are being paid to the former deputy leader of the Conservatives, Michael Ancram, who has died after a short illness, aged 79. Mr Ancram held the role for 5 years in the early 2000s under Ian Duncan Smith and Michael Howard. The new Scottish Conservative leader, Russell Finlay, described the former Edinburgh MP and Marquess of Lothian as a first-rate politician and a gentleman. A new skates park is being proposed under the M74 in Tradeston. Artists and skateboarders have been developing the plans for 10 years. They say the project would transform 8,000 square metres of unused space into a new type of public park. One of Scotland's first purpose-built multiplex cinemas will show its final film on Sunday as it shuts down for good. Cineworld, which first opened in 1989 as the Canon at Parkhead Forge, is one of 6 cinemas across the UK to close after the company entered administration last year. A senior doctor has told the Scottish Hospital's inquiry she felt certain issues were concealed and covered up amid infection control concerns at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow. Dr Teresa Inkster was the lead infection control doctor for the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and said she was labelled a whistleblower. Caitlin Hutchinson has this report.
A spike in unusual infections and the death of a number of patients, including that of 10-year-old cancer patient Millie Main, led to the setting up of this inquiry. And in her second day of giving evidence, the then lead infection control doctor for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde described events and attitudes during that time.
All the way through this and post-independent review report, there was a feeling that information was being concealed and things were being covered up.
Dr Inkster led the investigation into 2 cases of cryptococcus in 2019, a fungal infection that can spread to humans from pigeon droppings or guano. She said her suspicions were raised when a report did not include pictures of one of the problem areas.
It struck me as extremely odd that every other plant room had pictures to back up the findings, but the plant room that had the pigeons and the most significant issue within it had no photos. We just felt that there was more to this. It's quite hard to explain that we were not being given all the information. I found it really difficult to believe that there were no photos available of what was described as an infestation and that it took 11 men to clean up.
Dr Inkster also told the inquiry there was an attempt to put forward other, less plausible theories in a bid to save face.
The water incident, I felt very supported. I felt that patient safety was the absolute priority during that. Everyone worked really hard. And then when this came along, it seemed to be a shift in priority. I felt that there was more focus on organisational reputation rather than patient safety.
The inquiry taking place before Lord Philip Brodie continues. Caitlin Hutchison, STV News.
Rahman's here with the sport and a tough night for Celtic, Rahman.
Sure was, John, in the Champions League last night. A heavy defeat to Borussia Dortmund, but the players say it's important it doesn't derail them in the competition.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Autumn Sale.
Good evening. It was a sobering night. The words of Callum McGregor after Celtic were thrashed 7-1 by Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League last night, but he says it's important they don't go nuclear following the heavy defeat. Brendan Rodgers says his team looks spooked, but insists Celtic won't change their approach in European games. Jamie Borthwick looks back on a dismal night in Dortmund for the Scottish champions.
Like I said, never nice to lose a game of football. we are where we are, and we are probably where we expected to be after 2 games. So, you know, we don't have to go nuclear on it. It's a bad result, but we started the season really well, and we just need.
It was the latest heavy defeat that Rodgers has suffered in Europe with Celtic. In 2016, his side was battered 7-0 by Barcelona. The following year, Paris Saint-Germain won 5-0 at Celtic Park before putting 7 past the Scots at home. Since Rodgers returned to Glasgow, he has seen his team beaten 6-0 by Atletico Madrid, and now last night's hammering in Germany.
Really, I think it's one what we went in high in confidence. Team has been playing ever so well, so we felt in a really, really good place. But I think we needed to start the game much better than we did.
I think we'll watch it back, be honest with ourselves. I think that's what's really good about this group and the coaching staff, is that we are honest. We're not going to let this, kind of wobble us at all. We've just got to build on it and understand that, yeah, it happens, but it can't happen again.
Philippe Clement says Yanis Hadji has returned to the first team squad after the player and the club made sacrifices over a contract dispute. Based on appearances, Hadji is close to triggering a clause which would see the attacker receive an increase in wages. Compromises have been made and Hadji is now in Clement's plans. From out of the picture to back in the thick of it, Yanis Hadji's Ibrox career appeared to be over. After spending last season on loan at Alaves, he had been training with the Rangers B-team squad at the start of this campaign and was advised to find another club over a contract issue. But
the issue is solved, so both parties, the club and Hadji, came together, and now it's resolved. So then it's normal. He's back in the squad training, and it's by getting him back to his best level, that's the job now to do.
As you mentioned, it was a contract issue. Are you able to say if he's made a sacrifice?
Yeah, I said both parties worked towards each other and found each other finally. So that's a good thing.
He's a great player and a great kid. He's been integrated back in. He's a great lad around the place, and we're glad to have him. We've all been through similar scenarios at times, or witnessed similar scenarios, and it can be a difficult place sometimes as a player, and when there's things going on between the player and the club. That appears to have all been resolved.
Hadji isn't registered to play in the Europa League, so won't be available for the visit of Lyon tomorrow night. Clement's side started their campaign with a win over Malmo last week.
Winning against Lyon would be a huge thing. Even a draw would be a very, very, very good result if you see the difference in budget that they can spend on transfers. So we go full for that.
And I think that's always something that keeps this club coming back, is that, if you want to write us off, go for it, but we'll relish the challenge, and that's certainly something that we've done in the European games, and something that we need to continue throughout all competitions that we're in.
Mohamed Diomande returns for tomorrow night's match, but Ridvan Yilmaz remains on the sidelines. Kilmarnock manager Derek McInnes has tipped David Watson to have a very good career, but says the amount of goals the midfielder scores will determine how far he goes. Watson, who was voted PFA's Scotland Young Player of the Year last season, scored twice in Killy's draw with Dundee United at the weekend.
I've been about football long enough to see when I know a boy's going to do well. How well he does, what I think will be determined by how many goals he gets in a season. If he can be that running number 8 that can get double figures in a season, they boys are worth their weight in gold. But the thing that will separate him and where his career will go, I think, and what level, will be being a goal-scoring midfielder, because they're so important for any team.
Yes, David Watson certainly is a very good talent. That, folks, is all your sport tonight. See you again tomorrow.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Autumn Sale.
Now here's Sean with a look at the weather.
Light winds rolling in from the west. We'll be joined by some very welcomed ice creams. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Very good evening to you. We started off with lovely blue skies for many of us this morning. A little bit of fair weather cloud bubbling up, cumulus cloud spreading out into stratocumulus. Most of that melting away through this evening with that high pressure over the top of us. Look at that little shade of light green, even blue coming onto the map tonight. A chilly one to come. Tomorrow with the high pressure still around, most of the clouds still being held at bay for the time being. So, any cloud that has bubbled up today, melting away through the evening. Not much to say about the weather map, apart from it's a clear and cold night to come. Possibility of a few mist and fog patches developing, especially parts of Lanarkshire, Stirlingshire and also towards Perthshire. But yes, those temperatures down to about 3 to 5 degrees fairly widely over inland areas. So there's a possibility one or two spots will get a little bit closer to freezing. So a chilly start to tomorrow. Any mist and fog clearing away fairly quickly, and then it's dry, it's bright for most of us once again. Although looking at the numbers in the wind arrows here in the west, the breeze starting to pick up throughout the day, especially across parts of the Hebrides, and also the risk of a few very isolated showers popping up, lights of Colonsay, Jura, Isla, Col, Tiree, and also around lights of Mull, but very, very isolated. We see more of a change coming in on Friday. We stay driest and brightest the further east we go, but in the west, windier conditions and some rain coming in as well. We still hang on to some shower outbreaks of rain later on Saturday in the west, but much more showery for many of us by the time we get to Sunday. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
And finally this evening, Super Ali, Coisty and now Ali McCoist OBE. The former Scotland striker received the award from Prince William at Windsor Palace this afternoon.
McCoist, who became a Rangers legend as a player and manager, was joined by family and friends as he received the honour. Vanessa Taff has more.
Mr. Alistair McCoist for services to association football and to broadcasting.
He's no stranger to a piece of silverware, and now he's got another to add to his collection.
It was fantastic, it really was. It was everything I'd hoped it'd be. It means an awful lot, I can't lie to you. It's very humbling and I'm very proud. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about my wee mum who will be watching somewhere with a big smile on her face.
It was performances like this that made the former Rangers and Scotland striker a star. With a career spanning more than 2 decades, he also spent time as a manager in the Ibrox dugout. That was followed by a move in front of the camera.
It was as good a performance as I've seen from Scotland in years.
But today was all about his family, and figuring out his cheeky Scottish charm wasn't enough to earn him some of the perks of his playing career.
But back in the day, you used to get comps handed out, and if the players weren't using their tickets, you used to get them, and things like that. So, but I found out it doesn't work like that down here.
So how many have you bought?
I did well. I got 4 of my boys and obviously my wife, which was great. So I did all right. I'm not complaining.
But how many did you want?
7 would have been ideal. I got 5. So I'm ecstatic with that.
A man who's had many celebrations on the pitch will be toasting a glass to his latest achievement. Vanessa Taff, STV News.
Congratulations to Ali McCoist OBE.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be you next, John. That's all from us tonight. Bye-bye.
Good night.